The lights dimmed just enough to feel intentional. Not romantic, not warm, controlled. Crystal glasses chimed around the table. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else checked their phone and slipped it face down like they already knew they wouldn't want a record of what was coming. My father stood. No toast, no smile. Before midnight, he said we need to clear something up. The room froze. Even the dishwasher behind the kitchen wall paused between cycles, a mechanical silence humming in my ears. My younger brother Logan didn't look at me. He stared at the table, jaw set, like a man waiting for an execution he didn't have to watch. My mother folded her napkin once, perfectly, neatly. That was how she handled messes. My father went on, "Families survive when everyone carries their weight." He lifted his glass slightly. "Not a celebration, a signal. As of tonight," he said, "Avery Collins is no longer part of this family. No hesitation, no tremor, just clean, surgical." A chair scraped. Someone inhaled sharply. My aunt whispered my name too late to stop it from hitting the air. I didn't move. I didn't ask why. I picked up my glass, felt the cold stem against my fingers, then set it back down untouched. That was the first mistake, apparently. Logan finally looked at me. His mouth curled, not quite a smile. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You've been dead weight for years." Dead weight. That phrase landed heavy, dense, final. I pushed my chair back. The sound cut through the room like a blade. My mother flinched. Not for me, for the noise. I stood. My father exhaled through his nose. "Sit down." I didn't. I said, "Sit down," he repeated, sharper now. I turned to face him. "You already ended the conversation." That was the second something in me snapped. I walked toward the front door. My coat still hung where I'd left it. I slid it on button by button. Slow, careful, like I was making a point without saying it. Behind me, my mother spoke for the first time. "You're embarrassing us." I looked back. "That was your move, not mine." Silence. I bent down, pulled on my boots, tied the laces tight. Each tug felt like sealing something shut. The door opened. Cold air rushed in sharp enough to sting. Snow slipped across the threshold and melted into dark spots on the wood floor. No one followed me. That hurt more than the words. The door closed behind me with a soft click. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, like you're a liability instead of blood, hit like. Subscribe. You're not crazy. And what they do in silence usually comes back louder than they expect. The car smelled like leather and cold metal. I sat there with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel, watching my breath fog the windshield. The house behind me glowed gold against the snow windows, bright alive, already moving on. Inside, they were probably refilling glasses, resetting the table, rewriting the story. That was their specialty. Growing up in the Collins family meant one thing: value was public, praise was loud, approval was transactional. My father built his real estate empire from nothing. He liked to say that often. My mother managed the image charity boards, galas, clean smiles. Logan learned early how to perform. Ivy League degree, fast promotions, the right jokes at the right dinners. And me, I worked operations, logistics, the invisible stuff, the parts that kept things from breaking. No applause, no spotlight. When I asked for a role in the family firm, my father didn't even look at my resume. "We need winners," he said, "not support staff." So I found work elsewhere. Long hours, quiet competence. I learned how to solve problems without asking permission. They called it settling. Tonight they called it enough. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "You didn't have to storm out." Storm out. I stared at the screen, then laughed once, short and sharp. Another message followed. From my mother. "We raised you better than this." Gaslighting always came wrapped as disappointment. I started the engine. Headlights carved through the falling snow as I pulled onto the road. Tires crunched. The house disappeared behind a curve. Halfway down the hill, my phone buzzed again. "Logan, don't come back. This is what happens when you refuse to improve." Refuse to improve. That was the third snap. Quieter. Deeper. I didn't reply. At a turnout overlooking the valley, I stopped, cut the engine, Cut the lights. Snow swallowed the sound of everything. No signal, no voices, just the dark. I sat there replaying moments like evidence laid out on a table. Every dismissal, every joke at my expense, every silence where someone should have stepped in and didn't. I let it hurt. Just once. Then the phone lit up again. One bar of service flickered, a voicemail notification. From my mother. Her voice was calm, measured. The voice she used when delivering bad news to strangers. Avery. She said this didn't have to happen. If you'd just tried harder, if you'd been more like your brother, we wouldn't be here. She paused, long enough to hurt. You did this to yourself. The message ended with a soft click. That was the one that broke clean through. No yelling, no rage, just clarity. I deleted the voicemail, blocked the thread, set the phone face down. Then I drove. By the time midnight hit, fireworks bloomed somewhere behind the mountains. I didn't look back. The road opened wide, empty, and different. They thought cutting me off would teach me something. They were right, just not the lesson they wanted. The first thing you learn when you're pushed to the edge is how quiet it gets. Not peaceful, just empty. No calls asking where you went wrong, no follow-ups, no let's talk this through. Silence like a locked room. That silence wasn't new to me. It had just finally said its name. I grew up in a house where success was announced, not felt. Where approval arrived only after witnesses were present. My father liked numbers that could be framed. My mother preferred achievements that fit neatly into conversations with strangers. Anything else didn't exist. At dinner, Logan's milestones were listed like quarterly reports. Test scores, internships, offers. My father would nod once satisfied, as if the world was working exactly as designed. When I spoke, conversations drifted. Someone checked their phone. Someone refilled wine. That pattern started early. When I was 16, I won a regional operations challenge: process, design, logistics, efficiency modeling. I came home with a plaque and a smile I couldn't hide. My father glanced at it once. "Can that get you into a real school?" he asked. Logan's acceptance letter arrived 3 months later. We went out to dinner. That was the first time I understood the hierarchy. By the time college ended, I already knew where I stood. Still, I tried. I asked for a role in the family firm. Not executive, not leadership. Operations, back end. Fixing things before they broke. I sent a clean resume. No emotion, no entitlement. My father skimmed it. "This doesn't align with where we're going," he said. Logan didn't even pretend to hide his grin. "We need people who elevate the brand," he added. "Not this, that word." I didn't argue. I nodded, thanked them, left the room. That night, my mother knocked on my door. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, robe tied too tight. "You can't expect everything to be handed to you," she said. I stared at her. "I didn't." She tilted her head. "Then why do you always seem disappointed?" That was the first time I realized disappointment was my crime. So I left. I took a job managing late-night operations at a private hospitality venue. Not glamorous. Long hours, quiet wins. I learned how to keep people calm when things went wrong, how to read tension before it exploded, how to clean up other people's mistakes without humiliating them. It suited me. My family hated it. My father showed up once, unannounced, stood at the edge of the room watching me handle a problem with a guest who was halfway to screaming. Afterward, in the parking lot, he said, "This reflects on us." I waited. "You're better than this," he added. He didn't mean capable. He meant visible. When relatives asked what I was doing, my mother smiled tightly. "She's figuring things out," she said. Logan was less generous. "She likes playing small," he told people. "Some people just don't have ambition." That one stuck, because ambition was the only thing I'd ever had. At family events, I became background noise. The helper, the extra chair. I was asked to pour drinks, move boxes, keep quiet during speeches. Once during Thanksgiving, I corrected a logistical error in a story my father told about an early deal. He cut me off mid-sentence. "That's not how I remember it," he said. My mother didn't look at me. "Let it go," she whispered. That was the second lesson. Truth only mattered if it protected the narrative. By the time that New Year's Eve arrived, I already knew the verdict. I just didn't know the timing. They'd been tightening the screws for months, fewer invitations, shorter replies, conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The night they cut me off wasn't sudden, it was efficient. What shocked me wasn't the announcement. It was how relieved they looked after, as if I'd been a loose end they finally tied. Driving away that night, I replayed moments I'd buried for years. The way my father praised Logan for ideas I'd suggested months earlier. The way my mother corrected my tone in public but never defended me in private. The way Logan once said, laughing, "You're not built for this level," and no one challenged him. That wasn't rivalry. That was permission. By the time I reached the city, the anger had cooled into something sharper. Recognition. They didn't misunderstand me. They understood me perfectly and decided I wasn't useful. That realization hurt less than I expected. It clarified things. I stopped waiting for acknowledgement, stopped hoping for fairness, stopped explaining. When people ask what it's like to be cut off by your own family, they expect drama. Tears, rage. The truth is quieter. It feels like stepping out of a room where the air has been bad for years and finally breathing clean. They thought pushing me out would make me smaller. What it did was remove the weight. And once that weight was gone, I started moving faster than they ever noticed. The first rule of being underestimated is this: you don't correct it, you let it work. Once my family stopped watching, everything changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. Like a switch flipped somewhere deep and stayed there. I worked nights, not because I had to, but because nights showed you the truth. People dropped their masks after the third drink. Patterns surfaced. Pressure revealed character. I wasn't just running a floor, I was studying it. Who complained loudly and tipped nothing? Who stayed silent and never returned? Who pretended to be important? Who actually was? I tracked everything in a small black notebook. No labels, no dates on the cover, just numbers, behaviors, outcomes. When the bar rearranged seating, I noticed how foot traffic changed orders. When lighting shifted warmer after 9 p.m., sales of premium spirits jumped. When a server slowed their voice instead of raising it, confrontations dissolved faster. Nobody asked me to do this. That was the point. My manager thought I was just detail-oriented. My coworkers thought I was intense. My family thought I was invisible. Perfect. One Friday night, a private group arrived early. European accents, sharp suits, tired eyes. The reservation system had double-booked their space. I saw the mistake before it exploded. The host froze. The supervisor started apologizing too much. Phones came out, voices sharpened. I stepped in. Not loudly, not aggressively. I changed my posture first, squared my shoulders, slowed my movements. Then I switched languages. The man leading the group blinked, paused. His irritation stalled mid-sentence. I explained the situation cleanly, took responsibility without groveling, offered 2 options, both framed as upgrades, neither as favors. He chose one. 10 minutes later, the group was seated. Drinks arrived in sync. Music adjusted. The night recovered. The man studied me over his glass. "You didn't panic," he said. "I didn't need to," I replied. He smiled once. Small. Measured. That interaction stayed with me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it worked. After that, I started being pulled into problems before they reached management. Quietly. Off the books. A VIP threatening to walk. A supplier late. A staff conflict brewing. I fixed things no one wrote down, and I learned something dangerous. The people at the top rarely know who actually saves them. Months passed. I didn't post about my work, didn't update LinkedIn, didn't announce progress to anyone who'd once dismissed me. I let results pile up silently. Revenue stabilized on my shifts. Complaints dropped. Repeat guests increased. Nobody connected the dots. Then came the email. No logo, no signature block. Just a name and a request for a call. I almost ignored it. Almost. The call was brief, polite, vague. The man asked about my background, my role, how I handled pressure. I answered carefully, not defensively, not impressively, honestly. He asked for a second conversation, then a third. Each time the questions sharpened. Case scenarios, hypotheticals, what-if failures. I didn't answer fast. I answered clean. Weeks later, I realized something else. This wasn't luck. Someone had been watching for a long time. Still, I said nothing to my family. When my father texted once out of the blue asking if I'd figured things out yet, I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. That silence felt earned. The first interview happened over video, neutral background, no branding, no small talk. The man leaned back after my answers. "You don't try to be impressive," he said. "I try to be effective," I replied. He nodded once. The second interview was harder. Live simulations, interruptions, changing variables mid-sentence. I didn't flinch. Stress wasn't new to me. Being dismissed was. This was easier. By the third conversation, I knew something was coming. Not exactly what, but enough to prepare. I didn't celebrate, didn't fantasize. I kept working my shifts. One night, Logan showed up at the venue, unannounced, drunk enough to be careless. He watched me from across the room, smirked, walked over. Still playing bartender, he asked loud enough for others to hear. I didn't correct him. I smiled. Still pretending to be important. His face tightened. "You think this goes anywhere?" he snapped. I leaned closer, lowered my voice. It already did. That was the third thing in me that snapped, but this time it didn't break. It locked. He scoffed, walked away. 2 weeks later, the offer came. Clear, precise, no fluff. A role that matched what I'd actually been doing for years. Compensation that made my stomach still. Confidentiality, emphasized twice. I read it 3 times before I breathed. I didn't sign right away. I went for a walk instead. Cold air, city lights. No applause. Just the quiet understanding that something irreversible had happened. I signed the next morning. Still, I told no one. Not my coworkers, not my relatives, not even the part of me that wanted validation. I kept my head down. Finished shifts, trained replacements, closed loops. The night before I was set to leave, my mother called. Her voice was neutral, polite, almost kind. "We're hosting a family gathering soon," she said. "You're welcome to attend if you keep things civil." Civil. I looked at the signed contract on my desk. The start date circled. The title printed in ink. "I'll think about it," I said. She hesitated. This could be a chance to reset. I smiled alone in my apartment. "It already happened," I replied. She didn't understand that yet. But she would. They all would. Just not because I explained it. Because silence, when paired with movement, becomes momentum. And momentum doesn't ask for permission. The promotion didn't come with applause. No announcement, no flowers, no congratulations from people who mattered to my past. It came as a calendar invite with a neutral subject line and a location that wasn't supposed to exist. I arrived early. Neutral hotel, mid-floor conference room. No logo on the door. Frosted glass. A receptionist who didn't ask my name just nodded and handed me a badge with a blank strip where a title should have been. That told me everything. The man who'd interviewed me before was already inside. Same posture, same stillness. He didn't stand when I entered. "Sit," he said. No small talk. He slid a folder across the table. Heavy, crisp edges, no branding on the cover. I didn't open it. He watched that. "You've been handling executive-level problems without authority," he said. "You don't escalate. You don't posture. You don't leak." I waited. "That's rare," he added. "And useful." I opened the folder. Title, scope, compensation. Equity language written in a way that didn't beg for approval. Start date sooner than expected. I felt my pulse once. Just once. "Questions," he asked. One I said. "Discretion." He smiled slightly. "Absolute." That was all I needed. I signed without ceremony. No handshake, no photo. Just a pen sliding back into its slot and a quiet click as the folder closed. That click landed heavier than applause ever could. I didn't quit dramatically. I gave notice. Trained replacements, closed loops, fixed things no one had noticed were broken. On my last shift, the manager thanked me for holding the place together. He had no idea how literal that was. Logan texted 2 days later. "Heard you're moving on. About time." I read it twice, then deleted it. My mother sent a calendar invite the same night. Family dinner, neutral subject line. No apology, no warmth. I declined. Silence returned, but it felt different now. It wasn't absence, it was alignment. The new office didn't smell like power. It smelled like clean air and espresso, glass walls, controlled light, quiet conversations that stopped when you entered, not because you weren't welcome, but because you mattered. No one asked where I came from. They asked what I saw. My first week I didn't speak much. I listened, mapped systems, noted bottlenecks, flagged risks that hadn't detonated yet. By week 2, they handed me a problem that had stalled 3 departments. By week 3, it was resolved. Not loudly, not publicly, just gone. Someone said, "How did you do that?" I replied. "I stopped asking the wrong people for permission." They laughed, then stopped laughing when they realized I meant it. The first time my family heard my name again, it wasn't from me. It was from someone they couldn't interrupt. A colleague forwarded an article, industry news, neutral tone, no praise, just facts, a strategic shift, a leadership edition, a quiet appointment, my name, correct spelling, correct title. Logan called immediately. I didn't answer. My father left a voicemail. "You should have told us," he said. "This affects the family." I deleted it without listening to the end. That was the 4th thing in me that snapped, cleanly, permanently. The event that followed wasn't planned as a confrontation. It just happened to include everyone who mattered. Industry summit, panel discussions, controlled lighting, neutral carpet. The kind of place where reputations were exchanged without emotion. I arrived early again. Habit. Checked logistics. Adjusted seating. Flagged a security concern no one else noticed. Then I took my seat in the front row. When they announced my name, it wasn't dramatic, just accurate. The screen behind me lit up. Name, title, role, applause followed, not thunderous, but steady, professional. I stood, walked to the stage, didn't look for them, but I felt it. My mother's stillness, my father's stiff posture, Logan's delayed reaction too slow to hide it. I spoke for less than a minute. No origin story, no redemption arc, just outcomes. When I finished, the moderator nodded once and moved on. That was it. No confrontation, no explanation, just proof. Afterward, my mother approached me near the exit. Not emotional, not warm, controlled. "Congratulations," she said. "I didn't realize you were capable of this." Capable. That word again. I met her gaze. "You didn't want to." She frowned slightly. "That's not fair." I leaned closer, lowered my voice. "Neither was the night you erased me." Her mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. My father didn't approach. Logan didn't either. They didn't need to. The silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't dismissal anymore. It was distance they couldn't close. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the day. Not with satisfaction, with clarity. They thought success would bring me back. They were wrong. Success didn't make me loud. It made me done. I didn't rise to prove them wrong. I rose because I stopped asking them to see me. That was the real switch. That was the quiet part no one noticed. And by the time they did, the door had already closed with a click they couldn't undo. The ballroom held its breath before she ever stepped on stage. Not because of drama, because power does that when it enters quietly. The annual Leadership Summit drew the kind of crowd that didn't clap easily. CEOs, board members, investors who didn't waste energy on standing ovations unless they meant it. The air smelled like espresso-polished wood and money that had already won. Elara arrived before sunrise. No entourage, no announcement. She checked sight lines, adjusted lighting temperatures, confirmed timing down to the second. The stage crew took notes without realizing why they suddenly cared more. She didn't rehearse. She didn't need to. By 10:30, the room was full. Low murmurs, programs folded and unfolded, phones silenced. Row 6, center aisle, her parents. Howard Moore sat stiff suit tailored to remind the room who he used to be. His jaw was tight. His hands stayed folded like he was bracing for something he refused to name. Beside him, Lillian Moore sat perfectly composed, spine straight, chin level. She had perfected the art of being unreadable long before this morning. On her other side, Caleb leaned back too casually, one ankle on the opposite knee. a practiced look of indifference that didn't quite reach his eyes. None of them knew. That was the last advantage they had. The lights dimmed. The moderator approached the podium. Applause rose and fell, polite and controlled. He spoke of market shifts, of recovery, of leadership that didn't announce itself. Then he paused. For our next segment, he said we want to recognize someone whose work has reshaped guest operations across multiple regions, quietly, decisively, and measurably. The screen behind him went dark, then lit up. Elara Moore, Chief Director of Guest Strategy. The font was clean, white against black, impossible to misread. There was a half-second of silence. Just long enough. Then the applause hit. Not scattered, not polite, sustained. Elara stood from the front row, smoothed her jacket once, walked to the stage with the kind of calm that comes from not needing anything from the room. She didn't look down at them. She didn't need to. From the corner of her vision, she saw it anyway. Her father's breath catch. Her mother's hands freeze mid-clap, then resume too late. Caleb's posture shift the confidence draining out of his shoulders like air from a punctured tire. Elara reached the podium, waited for the applause to settle. It took longer than expected. She spoke for exactly 47 seconds. No backstory, no family, no mention of being cut off, erased, dismissed, only outcomes, only data. She thanked her teams, spoke about systems, about accountability, about how excellence didn't require permission, only execution. Then she stepped back. That was it? The applause returned louder this time, longer. The moderator nodded, almost impressed by how little she'd needed to say. As she exited the stage, she felt it again, that old instinct to explain, to justify, to soften the blow. She ignored it. She had learned. They didn't approach her right away. They couldn't. Howard stood first, then sat back down. Lillian adjusted her scarf, though it didn't need it. Caleb stared at his phone, scrolling without seeing anything. By the time the session ended, the damage was done. Not publicly. Internally. That was worse. During the break, people approached Elara in measured lines, hands shaken, cards exchanged, quiet compliments delivered without exaggeration. Impressive, someone said. Clean work, said another. You've been on our radar, said a third. Her parents watched from a distance. For the first time in years, they were the ones waiting to be acknowledged. Elara left before lunch. She had another meeting. The decline didn't make headlines at first. It never does. It showed up as missed projections, delayed payments, restructuring emails written too carefully. The Moore Group struggled quietly. Overexpansion, bad timing, the wrong advisors trusted for the wrong reasons. Caleb left first. Exploring new opportunities, his announcement read. Howard stayed longer than he should have. Pride can be expensive that way. By the time the properties went on the market, the room had already moved on. Elara saw the listing in a morning brief. Numbers, locations, potential. She didn't smile. She didn't hesitate. The acquisition was clean, strategic, quiet. She insisted on retaining staff, rebranding without erasure, systems improved, training updated. When asked if there was any personal connection, she answered truthfully, no. The deal closed. Howard's name disappeared from brochures within a month. No ceremony, no farewell, just absence. The last message came 6 weeks later, from her mother. A single line. You didn't have to go this far. Elara read it once, then placed the phone face down on the table. She didn't respond. Because that wasn't what had happened. She hadn't gone far. She had gone forward. Years later, when people asked how she did it, how she endured being cut off, humiliated, erased, she never gave them the version they expected. She didn't talk about pain. She talked about clarity, about what happens when the noise stops and you finally hear yourself think. Family, she learned, wasn't where you came from. It was where you weren't asked to disappear. And the moment someone tries to make you smaller to stay comfortable, that's the moment you leave. Not loudly, not angrily, just permanently.